Nighttime Scary Stories, Part 1. In the quiet town of Ravenwood lived a couple named Peter and Jane. They had a dog named Max, a lively white dog who was fiercely loyal but had a tendency to bark at everything. Passing cars, rustling leaves, even the sound of the wind. His incessant barking had driven Peter and Jane to the brink of frustration. One chilly evening, Peter and Jane decided they could no longer tolerate Max's barking. "It's driving us mad," Jane whispered to Peter. "We need to get rid of him." Reluctantly, Peter agreed. They concocted a plan to take Max deep into the woods and leave him there. Under the guise of a late-night walk, they led Max to their car. The dog, ever trusting, wagged his tail and hopped in, oblivious to their cruel intentions. As they drove deeper into the forest, Max's barking grew louder, almost as if he sensed something was wrong. They reached a secluded spot, far from any trail. The forest was eerily silent, save for Max's frantic barking. Peter opened the car door and tried to shoo Max out, but the dog wouldn't budge. Frustrated, Peter force-pushed Max out of the car and closed the car door right away. As he reversed, there was a sudden sickening thud, but they didn't care what it was and didn't bother to check. They hurriedly drove back home, leaving whatever it was behind. That night, as they slept, Jane was startled awake by a scratching sound at the door. She quickly woke Peter. It was around 1 a.m. "Peter, do you hear that?" she whispered. Peter grabbed his gun and went to the door. The scratching continued, persistent and eerie. He turned on the porch light and yelled, "Who's there?" A dog barked in response. Peter and Jane exchanged horrified glances. "Was it our dog?" Jane asked, her voice trembling. Peter opened the door, and there was Max, sitting on the front porch, staring at them. "God damn, honey, I thought we got rid of him," Jane muttered. "We took him so far, I never thought he would know his way back home." Reluctantly, they let Max back into the house and returned to bed. The next morning, they were greeted by a nauseating stench of rotten flesh permeating the house. They searched everywhere but couldn't find the source. Jane suddenly remembered letting Max in last night. They searched for Max but found no trace of him, inside or outside the house. Confused and unnerved, they questioned each other. Was it a dream? They checked the door, but there were no scratches. "Something doesn't seem right," Peter said. The rest of the day passed in a tense silence. That night, as they lay in bed, the scratching began again. "Is this a dream?" Jane asked, pinching herself to be sure. They went to the door, and there was Max, just as before. "This is the second night," Peter said, voice shaking. "What's going on?" Once again they let Max in. The next morning, the stench was back, and Max was gone. Now terrified, they realized what they did to Max was wrong, but they didn't know if he was dead or alive. That evening, Peter's sister came by and asked if they could watch her daughter, Sally, for the night. They agreed, trying to mask their anxiety. Sally, an 8-year-old, asked about Max. They told her he was out playing. As they anticipated, the scratching started again around 1 a.m. They got up, and Sally, hearing them, asked, "Uncle, where are you going?" "It's Max," Peter replied. "He's scratching at the door." Sally looked confused. "I don't hear any scratching, Uncle." Peter and Jane stared at each other, bewildered. The scratching was loud and clear to them. "Come with us to the door if you want to see Max," Jane suggested. Excited, Sally joined them. As they approached the door, the scratching grew louder. "Do you hear it now?" Jane asked. Sally shook her head. "No, I don't hear anything." Peter opened the door, and there was Max, tail wagging. "There he is, our Max," he said, but Sally looked out and saw nothing. "Uncle, I don't see any dog," Sally said, confused. Peter and Jane were shocked. How could she not see Max? Max ran inside, and they chased after him to the bedroom, but he was nowhere to be found. Sally stood there, watching them, bewildered. "What are you guys doing?" she asked. "I didn't see any dog." Terrified, Peter and Jane spent the rest of the night in fear. The next morning, the stench was back, but Sally couldn't smell it. When Peter's sister arrived to pick up Sally, the first thing she asked was, "Why is there blood all over your back tire? Did you run over something?" Peter froze as the memory of that night flashed back. After Sally and her mother left, Peter and Jane drove to the woods where they had abandoned Max. The stench of rotten flesh grew stronger as they approached. There they see Max lying on the ground, already decaying. Sadness fills their eyes. Overcome with guilt and remorse, they dug a proper grave and buried Max with care. From that day on, they never heard the scratching or saw Max's ghostly form again. But the memory of their dog and the haunting nights he returned stayed with them forever, a constant reminder of their betrayal. Thank you for listening to Nighttime Scary Stories. If you like to hear more of my stories, please press the subscribe and like buttons to support me to keep making more videos for you guys. Don't forget to hit the notification bell. Thank you.